Now, people often talk fondly of the almighty sequel that is Terminator 2 Judgment Day, but they seem to frequently forget how great the original movie actually is. It's an expert blend of horror and action with a clever science fiction twist. And the production of this film is just as exciting as the film itself, as there are so many interesting aspects of the production that broaden out just how unique the shoot was. From cutting corners where they could to a far more complex original script, the Terminator is full of intriguing tidbits. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 20 things you didn't know about the Terminator. Number 20. Schwarzenegger tried not to interact with the cast during production. Contrary to the character of the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually a pretty approachable guy. Because of this, Schwarzenegger wanted to avoid his co-stars as much as possible in order to ramp up the fear factor when they actually got to see him, and it worked. When Hamilton first laid her eyes on Schwarzenegger in the Tech Noir nightclub, you really believe in her fear as he points his pistol towards her. This seems to have been also enhanced by the shooting schedule, as Schwarzenegger was the last main cast member to actually join the shoot, with his first scene being him in the hijacked police car looking for Sarah Connor. Number 19. The Terminator face puppet took 6 months to make. Probably the scene that has aged demonstrably worse than the rest, the face puppet created to look like Schwarzenegger took a full 6 months to create. The sheer effort that went into this creation is admirable, and in the final film, it looks fairly convincing in certain angles. Sadly, it is outshined by some of the other practical effects in this film, like the full model of the T-800 endoskeleton created by the late, great Stan Winston. Age has not been particularly kind to this puppet, and it was last spotted at the Profiles in History auction house looking kind of like a shriveled up prune. Number 18. The screenplay was subject to a lawsuit. James Cameron credits the idea of the Terminator to a nightmare that he had whilst in Rome during the release of Piranha 2: The Spawning. In the nightmare, a metal endoskeleton was dragging its destroyed body towards him whilst holding a kitchen knife, and this horrifying image became the basis for the film. But science fiction writer Harlan Ellison claimed otherwise. Ellison commented that he loved the film, but was convinced the screenplay was a direct copy of a TV episode called Soldier that he wrote for the series The Outer Limits. Ellison eventually brought it to court, and now he has a credit on nearly every new copy of the film released, including the version on Netflix. Cameron was apparently unhappy with this outcome, as he didn't see the lawsuit having much basis. Eventually, Cameron would say that he was unable to comment because of a gag order, and that he now no longer cares, although he still does agree with the decision. Number 17. The original screenplay was much darker. Cameron's original treatment for the Terminator was far darker than what we eventually got. This is quite the feat, as the film that we have now is filled with tons of dark moments. From the Terminator gunning down innocent people to find Sarah, to the nihilistic and hopeless future that's shown to us in Carl's nightmares. Out of all of them, the original Terminator is the darkest of the series. In Cameron's original treatment, however, the early plot point of the Terminator going through various Sarah Connors to find Hamilton's character was initially far more brutal. In the original screenplay, Connor had a leg injury, meaning that she had surgical pins in one of her legs. To find the right Sarah Connor, the Terminator would cut each of their legs open to identify the pins. These gruesome moments were cut from the film, but we don't actually know why. Either Cameron or the studio saw them as too violent, or the effects were just too difficult to pull off. Number 16. The endoskeleton smoke was cigarette smoke. Now, the budget on this film was pretty tight, and because of this, many corners were cut in order to get the shots required, and one of these cut corners occurs at the end of the film. As the endoskeleton is chasing Connor at the end, while missing half of its body, the smoke that emanates from its body as it's being crushed by the hydraulic press is actually cigarette smoke from one of the crew members. Cameron knew how to cut corners, having got his career started working with Roger Corman on small-budget B-movies, so when presented with logistical challenges on the Terminator, he knew quickly how to solve them. A similar corner was cut when Carl and Sarah exit the tunnel after spending the night together, as the fog that covers the area was actually just bug spray. Number 15. The film was often shot without a permit. Being on such a low budget meant that the film was often shot guerrilla style, so the crew had to often film without permits as they struggled to obtain them. Tensions were obviously high on set because of this, as everyone was eager to get the shots done and get out before being arrested. One scene that was filmed without a permit is the carjacking scene early in the story. In order to get the shot, only Cameron and Schwarzenegger were present on set. Many scenes also had to be captured before the sun came up, as the production shot on location for much of the filming period. This guerrilla style of shooting may have been challenging, but it adds a certain level of authenticity to the film, making it feel much more gritty and real. Number 14. Schwarzenegger trained a lot for the role. In order to act more like a machine, Schwarzenegger trained extensively for this role. One of his training exercises was to cover his eyes and learn how to dismantle, reload, and then reassemble guns on the fly. Of course, the effect of this is that the Terminator never looks at his weapon when he's reloading it in the film, making it far more unsettling. Schwarzenegger mastered the art of making it look robotic. A similar technique was used by Robert Patrick when training for Terminator 2, as he learned how to shoot his weapon without blinking. Number 13. The Infiltrator in Carl's Nightmare is a longtime friend of Schwarzenegger's. Back before Terminator 2, the rule of thumb seemed to be that anyone that's played a Terminator needed to be buff. This applied to the menacing Infiltrator Terminator that appears in Carl's Nightmare of the Future War. Franco Columbu, a longtime friend of Schwarzenegger's, plays this role. Although he's only seen for a brief moment, his massive stature adds a level of menace to this otherwise small part. Number 12. Acid was poured on Arnold. In addition to the commitment Schwarzenegger showed when preparing for the role, he was also content with taking risks on set. Case in point, the scene after the tech noir shootout. In the scene, Schwarzenegger has just been on fire and has to punch through a car window. Of course, hiring a stuntman to be set on fire is expensive, so Cameron decided just to pour a bit of mild acid, in his own words, on Schwarzenegger in order to give the impression that he was still on fire. On screen, you can visibly see the smoke being produced by the acid coming off of his jacket. It is staggeringly convincing and clear proof that Cameron knew what he was doing. A stuntman did later recollect that Schwarzenegger complained that the acid irritated his eyes, but can you really blame him? Number 11. Linda Hamilton spent much of the shoot in absolute agony. In the same way that Schwarzenegger is the Terminator, Linda Hamilton is Sarah Connor, and it appears that Hamilton was just as committed to her role as Schwarzenegger was to his, as she spent a large portion of the shoot in severe pain due to an ankle injury sustained sometime before the production began. In order to compensate for this, many of Hamilton's physical sequences were moved later into the shoot to allow her time to recover. Sadly, her ankle never fully healed by the time it came to shoot these sequences, and so it had to be taped before each shot. Because of this, in many of the film's chase sequences, Hamilton is in severe pain. Despite this, she never let it visibly show and remained committed to the role throughout, because after all, she is Sarah Connor. Number 10. The studio had no faith in this film. Orion Pictures, the company responsible for co-financing and marketing the film, were reportedly not at all enthused by the production and saw it as nothing more than cheap sci-fi schlock that they could maybe squeeze some money out of. Because of this, Orion essentially left the film out to die, barely promoting it at all. Schwarzenegger, worried about the lack of support and afraid that the film that he was proud of was going to flop, suggested to Orion that they focus on the love story between Connor and Reese in the hopes that more women would actually become interested. Orion didn't listen to the advice and pushed on with the marketing plan that they had in mind. And despite the lack of support, the film was a massive box office success. Number 9. Schwarzenegger was central to the production. After Cameron got Schwarzenegger for the film's titular role, he never considered anyone else. In fact, Schwarzenegger was seen by Cameron as so essential to the film that he was okay with delaying production whilst he went away to shoot Conan the Destroyer. He never even once considered recasting him. This stands as a testament to not just Cameron's great casting choices, but also just how tied to the character of the Terminator Schwarzenegger is. There would be no Terminator if it weren't for him, right? Well, number 8, O.J. Simpson was actually considered for the Terminator as well. Of course, before even settling on Schwarzenegger for the central role, Cameron considered many different people for the T-800, even Mel Gibson. One such potential choice was actor O.J. Simpson, and Simpson was actually the primary choice for a while, and comics were even printed with him in the role. In a bizarre alternate reality, we could have had him over Schwarzenegger. Eventually, Orion and Cameron concluded that Simpson was just air quotes too nice for the role, and he was taken out of the running. Of course, Simpson would eventually be put on trial for murder and subsequently spend time in jail, so the almost casting of Simpson in this role might be one of the strangest near misses in cinema history. Number 7. Schwarzenegger was originally going to play Kyle Reese. Before being definitively cast as the T-800, Schwarzenegger was in the running for Kyle Reese. Cameron never saw Schwarzenegger in the role, however, as he envisioned Reese as a much more scrawnier man than Schwarzenegger was. Cameron also never saw the T-800 as someone with Schwarzenegger's build. In the original concept art for the character, Cameron used Lance Henriksen's likeness to sell the film to potential buyers. The idea being that the T-800 is an infiltrator and should be able to blend in with a crowd easily, therefore meaning that someone with the stature of a former Mr. Universe could never do this. This original idea was changed when Cameron met Schwarzenegger, as he gave Cameron tips on how the role should be played. After this, Cameron saw nobody else in the role. Number 6. Leather wasn't manly enough for Schwarzenegger. No one can forget the image of the T-800 riding on a motorcycle, complete with sunglasses and a badass leather jacket. It is one of the Terminator's most iconic looks, so iconic in fact that it became his default attire in later entries. Initially, however, these scenes had to be delayed because Schwarzenegger didn't think the leather jacket that the costume department gave him was manly enough. Because of this, the shooting had to be pushed back a few days while they designed a new, much more manly leather jacket for him to wear. Number 5. Cameron was sleeping rough when he wrote The Terminator. It's crazy to think that Cameron, now the 5th highest grossing director of all time, was living rough when he first wrote The Terminator. Of course, fans will know that Cameron's first directing credits is on Piranha 2: The Spawning, not The Terminator. Cameron was brought on to direct the Piranha sequel when the original director left. Cameron was the official director for 2.5 weeks before he was fired by the producer, who led the production from there. Cameron thought that he was doing a good job and hadn't realized that he'd been replaced. Upon seeing what they were cutting together, he wanted nothing more to do with it, but unfortunately for him, they had to release the film with his name attached as director, and there was nothing that he could do to change it. Cameron later recounted that he had no legal power while sleeping on his French couch and living in his car. Because of this, Cameron had no money and was forced to start writing The Terminator with absolutely nothing. Number 4. Cameron's career hinged on The Terminator. While wrapping up pre-production on The Terminator, Cameron was approached by executives at 20th Century Fox who, having seen the script for The Terminator, believed that he was the right fit for a sequel to Alien. Cameron came up with a pitch, and the delay to filming caused by Schwarzenegger shooting Conan the Destroyer allowed him to write an almost finished script for what would become Aliens. The producers liked the idea and told him that he could direct the Alien sequel if The Terminator was a hit. Because of this, he considered many elements of the film as a dry run at the Alien sequel. The Terminator wasn't just a hit, it was also a favorite amongst critics, who saw it as a breath of fresh air. Because of the positive response to the film, Cameron was given the green light to work on the Alien sequel. Number 3. The Terminator ate food in the original treatment. Cameron's original treatment for the film included many elements that were eventually scrapped, and one of the odder aspects of this original treatment is that the T-800 needed to eat food in order to maintain the organic tissue that covers its endoskeleton. Initially, the audience would have seen the Terminator eat a candy bar in order to sustain itself, but the scene, and indeed the entire concept, was omitted from the final script. Seemingly, it was removed as it took away from the Terminator being robotic and inhuman. But an idea of this did make its way into Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, but was actually then cut after testing poorly. Number 2. The original treatment also featured a liquid metal Terminator. Now, as mentioned before, the original treatment for the Terminator was far more ambitious and contained many more elements that were cut from the final film. In the original narrative, 2 Terminators were sent back along with a human to combat them. The first would be killed by the human, and a liquid metal Terminator would be sent back in retaliation. Cameron liked the idea but came to the conclusion that the effects just weren't up to scratch, and the second Terminator would have to be cut. Cameron eventually got to see this idea come to fruition in Terminator 2: Judgment Day, as by that point his status as a director had grown and he could convince the studio to give him a massive budget necessary to pull off the liquid metal Terminator, and the result is rather astonishing. And number 1, Schwarzenegger thought that this film would suck. In what must be the most ironic piece of trivia surrounding The Terminator, before getting on set and working directly with Cameron, Schwarzenegger thought that this film was going to be awful. Whilst on the set of Conan the Destroyer, Schwarzenegger was asked about any films that he had coming up. When the conversation turned to The Terminator, he referred to it as some movie that I'm doing. Once he actually got on set and began working with Cameron, though, he completely changed his mind. Now, The Terminator is his most iconic role, and he has publicly said that out of all of his films, The Terminator is his favorite, and it's not hard to see why. And there we go, my friends. Those were 20 things you didn't know about The Terminator. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice, where I do all of my streaming outside of work, and it'd be great to see you over there. But before I go, I just want to say something. Hope you treat yourself well, with love and respect, my friend, both physically and mentally, because you deserve the best things in life. And do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise, alright? You are a massive ledge, and I want you to go out there and smash it. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.